a mirror used in shamanism in these parts of Mongolia. And the toli is traditionally worn as part of a shaman's attire, around his neck, around his apron. It's often called armor against hostile spirit attacks. Tolis have additional purposes as well. They are used for a variety of practices, including purifying vodka.
Wow.
All right. Collecting and trapping hostile spirits, providing a home for the helper spirits. They're also an act as a vessel for spiritual power, called the wind horse. An archaeologist that did a lot of work with the shamans up in this area, he talked to a bunch of shamans and wanted to know how the toli worked. And they told him they're called the white horses of the shaman. The mirror itself was seen as a vehicle for the shamans to travel. So although I'm taking two parts of the monolith from Space Odyssey 2001 and also the one in the desert, which could just be an art piece, but the idea of the monolith and the idea of the mirrors is that one of them has great power and the other one is the transfer of the shaman himself into the physical world and into the spirit world. Huh. So maybe the idea of the monolith, whether it's just a recreation of Stanley Kubrick or if it has some kind of meaning in ancient times, is that the actual representation of a monolith is the power of the ability to have power in this third dimensional reality, and the mirror is used to travel through those different dimensions. And if you're a shaman, you know how to use both.
Okay.
Whoa.
All right.
I
thought there was going to be a pretty tenuous connection there, but that was pretty seamless. I like that. The
No
mirror
problem.
finish and the monolith.
I'm
Well
so
done.
shy.
No, well done.
No, that was super dope. So the monolith that they found is a mirror-like surface, and it's so. I wonder if it's more than an artist. Is it shamanic? Because I know the one, Matt, you brought up. I quickly looked at an article, and I don't even remember the mountain, but apparently that one is pointed towards some sort of mystical mountain. The one in the desert,
okay.
I don't know if it's around anything related to mystical or indigenous people or anything in the past. That's what I want to know, because then it would make more sense to me.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to look at is their coordinates, whether that was some sort of, I don't know, nexus point of telluric current or something like that. I don't know.
Could
Just
be.
a thought I had.
But also, the idea that humans have these, for instance, I hate going back to this movie because that's what everybody keeps talking about, but I mean, I love Stanley Kubrick, but the fact that was just his idea, right? That it just came out of his head, or the fact that this artist that put this thing out in the Utah desert, just came up with that. What I'm saying is that
Clark. Yeah.
that we, in our DNA, as it passes down through ancestors, we have images in our head, and we know things that we don't even know that we know. So maybe the idea of the monolith itself and the mirror is something that comes down from ancient times, and the power it represents.
Interesting. That's very, very, very cool.
I dig it.
Cool. Mic drop. What's up? All right.
And I'm out.
That was legit knowledge. Like, no, that was fucking cool. I don't even have anything to add to it. I'm just like, yeah, truth.
I'm shook. Yeah.
I just gotta work on my groaning, and I'll be okay.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta work on my groaning. So, Matt, did you dig up any dark shit on any shamans or mirrors or monoliths? Like, what do you got?
I certainly did. I took a shamanic journey. And not that I took anything, but I was just reading about shamans.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to obviously go to the dark side of shamans. And I came across, I was just looking for anything, and I went down rabbit hole after rabbit hole. It was fucking crazy. But so, yeah, I really wanted to find out about, shamans. We learn about, with ayahuasca and stuff, how in South America, how they're these guides, these spiritual guides. And I got to thinking, they're still human. They suffer from the same vices that we do. So what happens when shamans go bad? And then I started going into what if these shamans are already dark people who work with the dark side of things, the dark magic, and their intention is to hurt people rather than help them. So anyway, I started off on JonathanEvett.com, and it's kind of a website blog, and it's his sort of spiritual journey and sort of investigating shamanic practices and hallucinogens, all sorts of stuff. Very much reminds me of the McKenna brothers kind of stuff, but more sort of new agey kind of spiritualism, that sort of stuff. Anyway, he has all these stories that he's sort of blogged about where he's traveled through South America and stuff, and he has this interesting section in a few parts about sort of the darker side of shamanic practices and ayahuasca in general. And he says in a couple of areas I thought were interesting, just these notes that he makes, where he says, when I was in northern Peru for 7 weeks and working with ayahuasca, I met an interesting elderly man. He had spent many years traveling South America documenting the use of ayahuasca. From what I recall, he was making a documentary, but it was weird that this guy also happens to be a seer, like S-E-E-R. Although his background was in business, he seemed to be like a successful businessman. He happened to have sort of a clairvoyant sight, which probably helped in his business, I would imagine. Anyway, during the conversation, he made this interesting comment that in his travels through the many years he'd been to South America and studying ayahuasqueros, he said he'd met very few who did not work with demons or demonic forces. And he thought that was interesting. Like, so there's, I guess a lot of these people claiming to be shamans have sort of nefarious things going on behind the scenes. And he also mentioned this other lady who was a German psychologist, and a psychotherapist, sorry, and she traveled he was in Cusco at the time, and she was in old Cusco, and I guess she was working with people who had Westerners who had come to South America to do these ayahuasca trips and had done a few sessions, and it just fucked him over. And she was trying to help them through the other side, because I'll get to what she explains was the main problem. But she talks about these two-faced shamans. And he asks, what do you mean by two-faced shamans? She says that many of the ayahuasca shamans are two-faced, meaning they have the face of the beneficial healer on one side and the face of malevolence on the other side. She told me a few of the many tactics they employ for their own gain. One of which was a dart of intent. She said that, it was not at all uncommon for many ayahuasqueros to place a dart into the luminous body of someone they are leading in ceremony. The dart is placed with the intent to influence that person to go back to their home country and tell as many people as they can about the ayahuasquero, like him personally, the shaman. And even to go back and organize groups of people to come back and work with the same ayahuasquero. So basically, using these people as like Manchurian candidates, basically to go back and like drum up business for them to get more clients.
Well, before you go on, that could be seen two ways. I'm sure you're about to get darker with it, but like I don't know if there's anything wrong with trying to get more people to do ayahuasca. Like I said bubble voice there for a second. You know what I mean? Because I believe in the power of psychedelics. I believe in the power of ayahuasca, and I think that more people should do it. So I'm not necessarily against that.
Yes.
I want to hear more before I judge.
Agreed, but I don't think this fella is necessarily has your best intentions in his mind. You know, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, like I agree with Matt. I mean, I know we did a podcast about this, but that I agree with doing psychedelics too. But like, who are you getting them from? And somebody who's making you like feel like you have to see them. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's somebody you should be doing ayahuasca with.
Yeah, you probably
right.
Right.
Yeah. So that was what the old fellow was warning about. You know, he said the majority of these shamans seem to have their own demonic attachments that seem to be influencing their practice, which is no bueno in my book. So anyway, this German doctor had many stories about these people who were pretty messed up, confused, deranged even, mentally unstable as a result of their work with ayahuasca. So I guess, you don't often hear about the bad side, but I get, it does happen by the sound of it.
Yeah, totally.
She mentions something else she mentioned, and she said this is the key reason she returned to Peru was to help people have a more integrative experience with ayahuasca. She commented that the mind of the traditional Peruvian is very different from that of the European or the Western person. For this reason, she felt many of them were not equipped to handle the kind of experiences that may come up for a Westerner, like, you know, their own issues of people who live in the United States, England, Australia, whatever, are obviously very different from people who live, you know, in the jungles of Peru. So, you know, when these things come up, she says, you know, a lot of the times the shamans, even when they have they're trying to help, they don't really understand what you're going through to be able to, you know, help you work through this. And so that was what she was doing over there, was kind of helping those people through who kind of were left in the void after their experience. Anyway, so that got me onto a very exciting paper from a lady called... Could be a man. Robin M. Wright. I'm just going to say this person. And they wrote this paper entitled Assault Sorcery, and it's kind of from what's the word I'm looking for? The study of cultures. It's coming. Anthropology. Yeah, it's from that point of view. But he has some really interesting stuff, and obviously really informative piece, and I found it pretty fascinating to read through. But I obviously went straight to the nasty stuff. I was like, all right, give me your best fucked up area that you got here, buddy. So I went to the section called Shamanic Attacks. And these are basically like these dark shamans and they're what they do, basically. And this gets pretty great. So assault sorcery may involve extremely aggressive physical attacks in the dark of night against powerless victims, usually women and children. And so they would say they would do this as either sacrifice or they would be hired by people to basically, if another tribe wronged them, they would go and sort of seek out the weaker people in the other tribe and sort of basically assassinate them. But they did it through really... Just listen. So so sometimes effigies are used in the course of stalking the victim. These particular shamans called the Cantina, dark shamans of the Caribbean-speaking people in northern South America, appear to follow a logic in the initial attacks, the objectives of which, first, to stalk and maim their victims, weakening them sufficiently so that it is impossible for them to recover. The victims are chosen from the weaker and more vulnerable members of the community, making the Canima's job easier. The Canimas maim the bodies of their victims first by dislocating bone joints, leaving bruised bodies and incapacitating the victim from launching any counterattack. So this is once they got hold of them, basically. It gets better. The sorcerers then provoked the total loss of control over a victim's orifices by inserting a jagged-edged armadillo tail into the rectum of the victim, shredding the sphincter muscles by rapidly pushing and pulling the tail in and out, after which they insert branches of aromatic leaves to the lower intestine.
What?
So, yeah, good stuff. So the victim... This
is all done close to a monolith.
Yeah, stay away from monoliths, people. So the victim does not survive, obviously, more than a week after this attack. And then shit gets very twisted indeed. Following the victim's burial, the Canima conduct nocturnal necrophagous rituals at the graves of the deceased, where they suck the juices called maba from the deceased intestines through a long tube or straw. From these juices, Canima obtain a much desired power that is his sustenance. Woo!
I'm going to throw up. What the
that's
hell?
A big,
just
it's a big yikes.
Drink.
Fuck.
Just take a shot of. Just take a shot of Everclear and call it a day. Like, what the fuck is wrong with people?
It's
so different
elaborate.
cultures, So, to each their own. And then he goes on to this other.
Wait,
this other
it goes
group.
on. That's
No, that was the end of the Canimas. they're a special group. But he talks talking about different poisons used, and this